On the 22nd of September 2023, during the United Nations General Assembly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu displayed a map of the Middle East while delivering his speech. Observers quickly noticed something controversial. In the map shown by Netanyahu, the territories of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem areas internationally recognized as Palestinian territories were depicted as part of Israel. This presentation triggered strong criticism worldwide. Many analysts and commentators began asking a serious question. Was Netanyahu hinting at the idea of Greater Israel? This raised renewed curiosity about a concept that has existed for more than a century but remains controversial and widely debated. What exactly is Greater Israel, and why is it being discussed so much today? The debate intensified recently after an article published in the Israeli English-language newspaper The Jerusalem Post went viral. The article carried the provocative title "Is Lebanon part of Israel's promised land?" In that piece, the origins of the Greater Israel concept were explored, discussing both its symbolic or religious meaning and the territorial interpretations sometimes associated with it. Discussion about Greater Israel grew even more after Israel's military operations in Lebanon. The concept has not only energized some far-right Israeli groups who support Jewish settlement expansion, but it has also inspired organizations such as the South Lebanon Israeli Settlement Movement, which has posted maps online identifying possible Jewish settlement locations in southern Lebanon. In those maps, Arabic place names were replaced with Hebrew names. This idea became even more prominent after Netanyahu formed a coalition government with far-right Zionist parties in Israel. According to some interpretations discussed in the article, the concept of Greater Israel originates from passages in the Jewish religious scripture, the Torah, also known in Islamic tradition as the Torah. Certain interpretations claim that the land promised to the Jewish people stretches from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates River, which would extend as far as modern-day Iraq. However, interpretations of these passages vary widely. For some people, the promise is purely spiritual or symbolic, while others interpret it geographically. The roots of the Greater Israel idea can be traced back to the early Zionist movement, a political movement that began in Europe during the late 19th century. The movement aimed to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine and encourage Jewish migration there from Europe. One of the earliest references to a Greater Israel concept appears in the diary of Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern political Zionism. In 1898, 1 year after the First Zionist Congress, Herzl wrote in his diary about a proposed Jewish state whose borders could stretch from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates River. Herzl also discussed how such a region could gradually transform from an Arab majority area into a Jewish majority state through migration and settlement. After World War I, the issue resurfaced again during the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. At that time, the victorious Allied powers, including Britain and France, were dividing the former territories of the defeated Ottoman Empire. One of the regions lost by the Ottoman Empire was the Levant, an area that had been a center of Arab civilization for thousands of years. Arabs had lived under Ottoman rule for centuries, and after the empire collapsed, they hoped to establish their own independent states. However, Britain and France instead divided the region among themselves. Many historians argue that the modern Middle East borders were largely drawn in European offices rather than by local populations. In fact, the boundaries that define today's Middle East were heavily influenced by the Sykes-Picot Agreement, negotiated by British diplomat Mark Sykes and French diplomat François-Georges Picot. The borders were often drawn arbitrarily, sometimes literally with rulers and pencils on maps. Critics argue that these colonial boundaries created artificial divisions among different religious and ethnic groups: Muslims, Christians, Sunnis, Shias, Arabs, and Kurds, laying the foundation for many of the region's modern conflicts. In 1919, Zionist leaders also presented their own proposal for the borders of a future Jewish state. One of the leaders involved in presenting the map was David Ben-Gurion, who later became Israel's first prime minister. The proposed map included not only Palestine but also parts of southern Lebanon, the eastern bank of the Jordan River, and the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. However, Britain and France ultimately rejected this proposal. The debate over the borders of a Jewish state continued for decades. In 1931, during another Zionist Congress, the right-wing Zionist leader Zvi Botinsky raised the question of whether Transjordan, modern Jordan, should be included in a future Jewish state. Jabotinsky believed the issue was extremely important. Today he is often considered an ideological predecessor of the Israeli political party Likud. In 1923, Jabotinsky published one of his most famous essays titled The Iron Wall. In it he argued that the local Arab population would never voluntarily accept Jewish settlement in Palestine. According to him, throughout history no colonized population had willingly accepted foreign settlers. Therefore, he argued, a Jewish state could only be established if Jewish settlers created an iron wall of military and political strength that local populations could not break. In 1948, Israel declared independence. Immediately afterward, several Arab countries went to war with the new state. The conflict resulted in the displacement of a large number of Palestinians from their homes. Since its founding, Israel's territorial boundaries have changed several times due to wars and political agreements. Another major turning point occurred in 1967, during the Six-Day War. During this war, Israel captured several territories, including the West Bank, Gaza, Egypt, Sinai Peninsula, Syria's Golan Heights. These conquests effectively doubled Israel's territorial size at the time. Later, under international pressure, Israel returned the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt but retained control of the Golan Heights. Another significant event occurred in 1982, when Israel launched a major military invasion of Lebanon, its first large-scale military operation outside Palestinian territories. During the Lebanese Civil War, Israel supported certain Christian militias against Palestinian groups. One of the most tragic incidents of that period was the Sabra and Shatila massacre, in which thousands of Palestinian refugees were killed in a refugee camp. Some strategic ideas about weakening Arab states appeared in a controversial article published in a journal of the World Zionist Organization. The article, titled A Strategy for Israel in the 1980s, suggested that internal divisions within Arab countries such as sectarian conflicts between Sunni and Shia Muslims could potentially weaken those states. The document discussed the possibility that countries such as Syria and Iraq might fragment along sectarian lines. Similar to Lebanon, critics often connect these strategic ideas with later regional developments. For example, in 2002, Netanyahu supported the U.S. invasion of Iraq, arguing that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, claims that later proved unfounded. The invasion ultimately destabilized Iraq and contributed to sectarian conflict between Sunni and Shia groups. Similarly, during the Syrian civil war, Israel officially maintained neutrality but later acknowledged providing some support to certain opposition groups while also conducting military strikes against Syrian government positions. Before concluding, it is important to mention a lesser-known historical survey. After the 1919 Paris Peace Conference, an American investigative group called the King Crane Commission conducted a study in the Levant to understand what type of government local people wanted. The commission surveyed 1,520 villages across Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Transjordan. Among roughly 3.2 million people surveyed, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Druze, around 80% supported the idea of a unified Greater Syria. This proposed state would have combined Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Transjordan into a single Arab nation. However, that idea never became reality. The colonial powers of the time had different geopolitical plans for the region. Ultimately, many historians argue that the modern Middle East emerged from a mixture of colonial decisions, nationalist movements, and regional conflicts. Whether concepts like Greater Israel or Greater Syria represent religious symbolism, political ideology, or historical speculation remains a subject of intense debate. One thing is clear: unity among nations has historically challenged imperial powers, and many believe the future of the region will depend on whether cooperation or division shapes its politics.